let's get started slowly. So my name is Marco. I'm from Plus Plus. Today we'll have Hannah talk about mentorship at Squarespace. But before we do that, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a background and how to participate. So please keep your camera on. We'd like to see you and see your participation. Feel free to ask questions. We have a new platform, so we use Session to run Technicon events now. So you can ask the questions in the chat. It automatically goes to everyone. And we also have this capability of highlighting the questions. So Tomomi and I look at solid questions and we bring them up and highlight them so it pops up for everyone, and then Hannah will get to that. If you have any technical issues, ping Tomomi. You probably met her already. She invited you probably and sent you all the emails, etc. We do have a Twitter handle, and I'm sure we're working on threads as well, right? So there's that as well. So feel free to share your experience. Just a little bit about the community. We started way back when as a in-person event. It was an annual conference, originally at LinkedIn, subsequently at Twitter, and then COVID hit, and then we moved to online. I think the number is now higher than 600, probably closer to 800 members plus. So we meet every month, have talks, and it's by us, for us. So it's a really community organized and led. We are considering doing in-person eventually again. So that's a conversation to be had now that we're all pretty much out of COVID. There's a board behind the scenes that's organizing, that's making a lot of calls and organizing a lot of events. I see a few members here. So Chris and Andrew are on the call. So is Jasmine. I'm not sure if Rajan is here, but say hello if you are, and Katie as well. And of course, Tomomi really does all the hard work of getting us all together and organizing everything. So the board usually, updates things like community guidelines, and also we brainstorm around which topics make sense. Since we're talking about guidelines, we're really trying to create a space that's for us, by us. So just kind of be a good, citizen and, maintain a privacy and do not solicit and so on and so on. So that's basically just the basics that are maybe obvious, but we spell them out just in case as well. The types of talks that we organize are roughly falling into a category we call employee enablement, tech enablement, team enablement, something to do with enabling people at tech-forward companies to do their best work. And that usually involves a number of different programs. It could be actual onboarding, so engineering onboarding, functional onboarding. It could be knowledge sharing, so making sure that everyone in the company is on the same page, learning from peers and having that collaborative learning experience. Mentorship, coaching, office hours, buddy system, etc., falls under sort of like a similar category of informal one-on-one usually or small group gatherings, of which we're going to be talking about one today. Documentation, and also connecting the dots and measuring how things are performing. So those are usually the types of talks that we see at Technicon. And so with that, we're going to have Hannah present. Hannah's been with us for a while. She runs a number of learning and development programs at Squarespace. And today we will hear about what Hannah's doing in terms of the mentorship programs. This is something that we've seen across the industry become more and more popular. Usually companies may have had one mentorship program, now it's multiple. And sometimes it's just a buddy system for new hires. Sometimes it's as involved as peer mentorship across the entire company, career mentorship, etc. So with that, I'd like to welcome Hannah, and I'm going to stop sharing. So Hannah, welcome.
Thank you so much. I am going to share my slides now. Let's see. Can you all see that? Yes, I can see it. So I'm assuming you can see it too. Thank you for the introduction. Happy to be here today. Talking about scaling up mentorship programs at Squarespace. Because it's a small group, like I think feel free to ask questions throughout. Maybe you would have done that anyway, but feel free to ask questions throughout. And feel free to, I don't know if this is okay, but feel free to unmute and ask a question too. I don't mind that. It won't throw me off. So I think if this feels like a sort of conversation, that's great. So with that, I'm Hannah. She, her, hers, my pronouns. This is a photo of me with longer hair, but it is me. And I run our leadership and learning team at Squarespace, which is basically our learning and development team. We just call it something different. In case you are unfamiliar with Squarespace, I promise this is not me soliciting or pitching Squarespace as a product, but just to give you some background, Squarespace is an all-in-one platform for for one's online brand or business. We've been around for about 20 years, a little over 1,600 employees, and we're a hybrid workforce spread across primarily US and Europe, with a number of offices there, just so we can sort of ground the mentorship stuff I'll be talking about in the size of the company and all of that. Today, I have prepared some slides, but again, happy to answer questions. I sort of prepared slides I thought might be interesting, but I'm happy to go into more depth on anything that I am not covering fully. But I wanted to talk about why we decided to invest in mentorship and put energy toward building mentorship programs at Squarespace, how we went about doing it, best practices, which are really lessons learned. So it's like we tried this, it either did or didn't work, and what we've learned from that, and best practices pulled from that, and then leaving time for questions at the end. But as I've mentioned a few times, I am happy to take them throughout as well. So to start, in terms of why we decided to focus on mentorship, the opportunity that we saw and sort of the problem we were looking to solve was we wanted to scale and decentralize learning. We have a pretty lean team and a lot of learning and development desire across the company. So we wanted to find a way to provide that without having it only be from centralized L&D. We wanted to build a learning culture, or we saw the opportunity to build a learning culture that really started at the top. So again, slightly connected in the sense of not so much centralized from L&D, but coming from leaders at the company. And we wanted to use our learning products and our learning initiatives to foster connection across the company. I think this became increasingly important as we went first fully virtual and now hybrid. We sort of want in all of our programs to find ways to build connection, build community, build networks, because some of that stuff isn't happening quite as organically as it was pre-COVID when everyone was just sitting around in an office together. We also, as a team, and I think as a company, believe that everyone has the capacity to be a leader, whether you're a people manager or not, no matter what level you are in the organization. And we saw exposure-based peer learning as a really nice way for us to sort of make good on this belief and put it into practice. So the first question that we came upon when we were thinking about how we could expand that exposure-based peer learning is coaching versus mentoring. And I'm going to define them here in terms of how we think about them, because I think sometimes people think of these as synonyms. Sometimes people define coaching as what we would define mentorship as, and vice versa. So just so you know what I'm talking about when I talk about mentorship as opposed to coaching. Coaching for us is very much helping employees self-identify the best path forward for a particular challenge. So it's really all about the coach asking questions to help that person, the coachee, find their own answers and build skills in that way and solve problems in that way. It's much less advice coming from that coach, whereas mentorship is a little bit more advice. That mentor sharing knowledge, experience, tips, tricks, skills, etc., to help the employees grow. We have had a coaching program in place for a while. And so as we looked to see how we could address the opportunities above, we thought we could sort of just expand our coaching program. We already have it in place. One of the concerns we had, coaching ask, mentor tell. Yeah, I love that. That's more simple than I put on these slides. And one of our Squarespace values is simplify. So I might take that and and try to refine these slides for future use. We already had a coaching program in place. It's been really successful, but it is a big commitment. I think it requires a bit more training to really make sure that coaches are properly trained and understand what coaching is and how it's different from mentoring or consulting or therapy or all of these various sort of adjacent ways that people help others. And it's a commitment from the coachee. I think it can be sort of a bigger investment of time. Mentorship, on the other hand, would be a new initiative, I think, which was both positive and potentially challenging. It meant that we were going to have to invest more time to spin it up, but also positive in the sense that we could expand the way we currently support our employees and the business. And it, I think, left room for a little bit more knowledge sharing and a lighter lift for mentors than being a coach. And so we decided to go with mentorship, and we still have a coaching program. Happy to talk about that too. But this talk I've built mostly around what we do for mentorship. So we decided this was a good way to address the opportunities that we saw and that had been identified not just by our team. In terms of getting buy-in, I will say for us, convincing senior leadership was pretty easy. And I know that's sort of like a boring answer because maybe people are curious about this, and I don't have a long story of how much work we had to do to convince senior leadership to let us go ahead with a mentorship program. I think part of this is the brand of the team was already pretty strong. We already had a lot of things that we put into place that were successful. And so leadership, I think, at the company was willing to go with whatever we thought was would be helpful. I think we also have a company, the company mission in terms of our customers is all about empowering them to create these beautiful presences online. And I think internally, we very much have a culture of learning and empowerment and growth. So people were pretty bought into mentorship from the start. I think it also didn't hurt that we had a tool in place, and the tool, it was plus plus. And I'm also not trying to like push people to plus plus, even though I would push people to plus plus. I think it's terrific. But it was a tool that made this really easy, that we'd already been using, that leadership had already seen. And it meant it was going to be pretty easy to stand this up. I just saw a question and I want to make sure I'm answering it. Was senior leadership only intellectually convinced, or were they convinced to the level that they rolled up their sleeves and modeled behavior? So I think it's a really great question. And I would say definitely the former and sort of partially the latter. So they were intellectually convinced for sure. I think initially they were not necessarily, they didn't necessarily think that meant that they had to go and be mentors and really support in that way. But I think that level of buy-in came once we launched programs and once they saw the benefit of the programs. So I would say supportive from afar, and then once they saw the value of them, much more actively supportive. I hope that makes sense and answers your question. But a lot of it came from seeing the success of the programs, hearing from people on their teams who had been mentors, who really got value out of the experience, hearing from mentees about the value. Obviously, we shared sort of data from our various pilot programs that we've run. So that was more incremental, but really good question. And I think for us, in terms of buy-in, the harder sell, or what was really a learning opportunity for us, was aligning on clear roles and responsibilities and getting full commitment from our program sponsors. And this wasn't necessarily our most senior leaders at the company, but we launched mentorship in a few different pilots. And some of those pilots were with specific groups where we wanted a member of that group to really own the communication about it, the part of the strategy around it, like with us. But I would say that was a little bit harder. As soon as people heard we were rolling out mentorship, there was a lot of like, oh, I want that. Can you do that for us? And I think we, through iteration with our various programs, I think we have been able to refine and clearly define what our role is as a team. Like, we provide the tools, we provide the learning, we provide various things depending on the pilot, but also to make clear at the start of a mentorship program, what we expect from that program sponsor. I can talk a little bit more about that as I get into some of the pilots, some of the details. So when it came to like how we rolled out mentorship, we made some early decisions that primarily we have stuck to throughout. We decided to launch mentorship in specific programs rather than a company-wide launch, in part because we wanted to be able to prototype it and get feedback from people and sort of launch it incrementally as these pilots, but also because we thought that it would be most effective at first if we could offer it in sort of controlled groups where the connection between a mentor and a mentee would be a little bit more obvious to people, and a little bit more easily spelled out than just sort of launching it as a free-for-all for anyone at the company. I think eventually that may be what we do, but for now we have stuck to launching mentorship in these various cohorts. We made the decision that we wanted to also build and launch supplemental learning content, both live and self-paced, to make sure that mentors and mentees both understood what was expected of them, what the value of mentorship was, so that everybody was on the same page. We wanted to focus our mentorship specifically on career development and skill development. And we were intentional about, and we made different decisions for different programs, but we wanted to be really thoughtful about whether we wanted mentees to be able to browse and select mentors on their own or whether we would be doing the matching. And I think there are pros and cons to both. I think we've done both. And I think some work in certain circumstances better. In terms of our pilot groups, we launched our first 2 mentorship programs with ERGs, employee resource groups, in part because there was a lot of demand from these groups. Like they'd been wanting mentorship programs for a while. And also there's a fair amount of research to support that mentorship in ERG groups, in these kinds of communities specifically, can be very impactful. And so we thought it would be a really good place to start. We launched 2 separate pilots with ERGs. I will say with each pilot, I think we've gotten better and better. And I've attempted to incorporate some of those learnings in this session, but it's definitely an iterative learning process to launch this successfully and to launch this well. The other place that we've launched it is in our cohort-based leadership programs. So some companies might call these hypo programs. We don't use that term or that language, but you might be familiar with that. So sort of cohort-based multi-month leadership development programs. So to date, these might be slightly lower than actual numbers because these might be slightly out of date, but we've launched 4 formal mentorship programs, multi-month mentorship programs. Across them, we've had 70 plus mentors, 100 plus pairings of mentee and mentor, and we have, I think it's been really successful, and we have learned a lot as well. This is what our mentorship page looks like for a given program. This is Plus Plus. I guess another soft plug for Plus Plus. It's made mentorship really, really easy. Obviously, these are not our actual employees. These are TV characters, but I've only done that to protect the names of the folks who volunteered to be mentors. But basically, if people are allowed to choose their own mentors, they come to the landing page for mentorship. They would see all of these available mentors. There are many more if you scroll down, and then they could click into someone's profile and look at their skills and look at their bio. And it makes it really, really easy for people to find a mentor that is a good fit for them. The other thing I'll point out, it's actually not super evident on this page. I'm looking at most of these people, their title is director, but it's not all directors. It's not all senior leaders. It's not all managers even. We have senior level individual contributors on this list because we really believe that mentorship can come from anywhere. And because it's skill-based, I could choose someone to be my mentor who is junior to me, but has skills that I don't have. And we also have mentorship that is about career growth. And for that, sometimes people do want someone who is in their in their department and senior to them. But we've run a lot of skill-based mentorship programs. And in those, we really try to make clear to folks that you're choosing someone who has experience in the skill that you want to learn and grow. And for that reason, we have mentors from all over the org and very different levels. And I think we're really proud of that. I think it's a strength of the program. Was the skills list something you put together and people selected from, or was it free form? It was both. So we do have a skills list. And so people, can type something, and there's like a field, and people can type in, and then it will auto, populate if it's a skill that's already in the system. But people also had the ability to add their own skills. But I think I think either one could be successful and fine. We went with a pre-populated list just so that to create some consistency, so that, one person didn't say presentation skills and the other person said presenting and the other person said like presentations, so that there's a little more, consistency across like how we label those skills. But yeah, it was a mix of both. So I would say the things, sorry, I keep going into the chat. I hope that's okay. Netflix had a mentorship program, but realized that we have a huge problem with internal mobility. We should focus on allowing more growth opportunities for employees, such as internal, permanent, and temporary opportunities to switch teams. How has Squarespace addressed internal career growth and ensuring mentorship works in parallel? So this is a really great question. We are currently in the process of building this out more company-wide. The opportunities for like project work, gig work, shadowing, internal mobility, all of that. Right now, we've piloted it like separate from mentorship, but they all speak to each other. So mentorship would certainly be a development component of that. But they're sort of separate programs in terms of how we run them. We've piloted it primarily across two departments, so across our customer operations department and our engineering department, rather than a full company-wide launch. But it's something that we are planning to launch company-wide by the end of the year. So I think, let me just make sure that I actually answered your question. As how have we addressed internal career growth, mobility, and ensuring mentorship works in parallel? So we, in our LXP, if an employee, are there tools you're using to facilitate that? So we heavily use our LXP for this at the moment, though our mentorship lives in Plus Plus, which feeds into our LXP. But if you sign into that and you have selected a certain skill that you want to work on, or a certain department that you're interested in, it pushes opportunities to you. So it would be opportunities around project work, but also opportunities around a mentor in that field or a mentor with that skill, alongside learning related to that skill or learning related to that field or whatever it might be. So everything gets sort of centrally funneled through our LXP and pushed to individuals that way, so that if you, and when you click into, let's say, an opportunity for job shadowing, or an opportunity to do a project, or like a brief period of work for another team related to that, like it would link up all the different things that are connected to that skill. So if you scroll down on that page, you would also see learning paths related to that skill, and you would also see mentors who are available to mentor in that skill. So everything sort of sits in one place. Did that answer your question? Okay, great. If it didn't, and if you have other questions, feel free to ask them. In terms of best practices that we have learned, and some of these are from sort of mistakes that we made or things that we had to change along the way. When it comes to recruiting mentors, I think it's really valuable. And I think recruiting mentors is a challenge in these mentorship programs, right? It sort of comes back to that earlier question, is like, was leadership just intellectually bought in, or were they ready to actually do the work? I think when push comes to shove, or when sort of the rubber meets the road and you need mentors for these programs, that's sometimes where one can hit a challenge. So I think things that we did that helped were to really, really clearly emphasize what was in it for them. So not just like, hey, will you do us this favor and be a mentor, but make clear to them what the value is for them. And there's, a ton of, you could Google like value of being a mentor and find a lot of articles about it and data. So it's not really a secret, but I think we had to put that in front of them. And also, I think over time, we got better at asking them what they are hoping to get from the experience and making sure that we adequately like set their expectations, but also align those opportunities wherever possible. So one example that's come up is sometimes we have mentors who say, I really want to mentor, I'm a senior woman within my department and I really want to mentor like a young woman coming up in my department. And if it's a program where we are matching people, we know that, and we can make sure that the person who's volunteered to be a mentor is matched with a younger woman in her department. And that way she's going to feel fulfilled by the experience because it aligns with her values and what she wants to focus on. We've also had people say, I want to be matched with someone or I don't want to work with anyone in my own department. Like for me, part of the value of mentorship is also that reverse mentorship and the opportunity to build my network and have conversations with people who think differently than I think. And so we've been able to make that the case, both if we're matching, but also our tool allows people to be visible to certain groups and not others. So we can also sort of do that on the back end. And that I think has been helpful in ensuring not just that mentors volunteer, but that they continue to volunteer. So after one pilot or one program ends, that they raise their hand again. I think it's also been helpful to help mentors understand the value that they can add. I don't know what it's like at all of your companies, but I think people can undervalue their own expertise or their own skills or knowledge or the value that they can bring to a relationship like this. And specifically, folks who aren't the most senior leaders, right? I mean, I think the most senior leaders understand that there's value just from that. But some people who are, middle managers would say, like, I don't know what I can bring. And I think it was helpful for us to continue to show them that they have skills that are valuable, not just to people. Yeah, 100%, right? Imposter syndrome exists everywhere, including at the most senior levels. So I think we tried to combat that a little bit and to like help people see their own value. And I think that also helped more people raise their hand. And then a lot of the feedback that we got from mentors is that being a mentor actually helped them feel more confident in their own skills, aside from helped them feel good about mentoring someone and feel connected to the broader company and all of that good stuff. But a lot of people, I think, and we all know this, right, as sort of talent and learning and development professionals, one of the best ways to learn is to teach. And so I think people actually sort of found that they were honing their own skills and becoming more confident in their own skills through the mentorship process. It was really helpful. Maybe this is intuitive, but like very helpful to reach out individually and directly to folks to ask them to be mentors, as opposed to sending, like we have a group, we have distro lists that are like all senior leaders at the company. And that wasn't as effective as specifically reaching out to people and personalizing that message, which obviously takes a little bit of time. But what we have found is that once people are sort of in the mentorship system, like once they've volunteered to be mentors, they tend to stay there. So it was a little more work at the start of these, but we haven't had to do as much of it as upkeep. And make it as simple as possible for mentors to get into the system. So our system is really, really easy and very user-friendly and very straightforward. So there wasn't a really heavy lift for mentors when getting set up in the platform. And then this last bullet, this is the one that like may sound very, very obvious to people, but wasn't super obvious to us when we launched our first mentorship pilot, was to like lock in and confirm mentors before launching the program. We launched with an ERG at Squarespace that had a lot of interest and verbalized a lot of interest in mentorship over the years. And we were like, cool, we'll launch this program, we'll build the infrastructure for it, and we'll just launch it to the whole ERG at the same time. And people will just naturally sign up to be mentors and mentees. We educate them about how to do both. And it didn't work as well as we wanted it to work. I think because we hadn't reached out individually and directly, and we hadn't done all of these bullets that are above this bullet, basically, to make sure that we had enough mentors, that they understood what they would get out of it, that they felt confident enough to be a mentor. And so we had this slightly lopsided program where we had just many more mentees who had signed up than mentors. And so every program we've run since then, We just make sure that we have a clear list of the mentors ahead of time. Yes. So the time commitment, the question is the time commitment specified or does it vary? We have a recommended time commitment. So we've sort of tweaked this over time and may continue to tweak it. What we've typically ended up recommending is either 30 minutes a week or like 45 minutes every other week, something like that. It's a guideline that we share and many people follow it, but I think some people found that they wanted to meet more and some people found that they wanted to meet less. And so we don't mandate it by any means, but that's sort of what we've recommended. And we've changed that a few times over our programs, and that seems to be the sweet spot. And 30 minutes a week is really not like a particularly heavy lift. I think frankly, the mentors in our experience have been more willing to do 30 minutes a week. I think the pushback on any part of it has been, or when it comes up, is from mentees who maybe don't feel like they have had a chance to like practice what they've been talking about enough from one week to the next. And sometimes they have wanted to meet less, like every other week. How long does the relationship last? Yeah, these are all really, really good questions. So it's been different across different programs. I think our shortest mentorship relationship that we sort of launched in terms of a program was like 2.5 months, and our longest is 6 months. So it varies based on the program. I think 2.5 months was a bit short. It's sort of by the time we got these relationships off the ground, and by the time people had really built trust with each other, the program was over. Many of those mentor relationships continued beyond the official close of the program. So a lot of this is we have guidelines in place. We allow the mentor to be the person who says whether they're comfortable continuing to work with the mentee beyond, because they've only committed to however long, 3 months, whatever it may be. But if the mentor feels like it's a good relationship and they are happy to continue meeting, they by all means can. So it's varied a little bit depending on which program we are launching mentorship with, or like which group we're launching mentorship with. But I would say like 3 months is probably, in my opinion, a minimum. Okay. Overall mentorship program. Do you have a successful mentorship program? How would you allocate staffing resources per 500 employees? Most people think managing a successful mentorship program would take one person a couple of hours a week, and that is unrealistic, especially in the beginning. I completely agree. What I would say, if I'm fully understanding your question, is that and I'm not great at doing math in my head on the fly. So I might think like a little bit more about this afterwards and come back to you with a sort of more concrete recommendation. But I think that the work to scale up a mentorship program is a lot in the preparation for launching a program. So for us, it was, really thinking through. I mean, I mentioned earlier getting buy-in was easy, but we had done a ton of preparation to get that buy-in, like anticipating that it might not be easy. So we had all these strategy decks and a lot of like content around the ROI of mentorship. And so that was energy and effort. Setting up the tool was relatively easy, but is still some energy and effort. Being like really us just thinking through how we wanted to launch mentorship was effort. And then, creating comms around it was effort. Like I think a lot of creating our classes, like our asynchronous learnings, as well as our instructor-led sessions, that was effort. Running those was effort. Once those were in place, how many of you are working on it and how many hours do you think spent? Well, I can't think, how many hours spent is something I'm going to have to get back to you on. But I think we primarily had, I would say, the strategy around it was developed by probably 2 members of the team in collaboration, but one of them was the owner of mentorship. And that person, we sort of had one like main person who was accountable for the work. And this was probably a quarter of their time for a quarter, if that makes sense. So a fair amount of work, but not in an extended way. And one of the things that I'll get to, I don't have that many more slides, but one of the things that I'll get to in a future slide is whether to do matching yourself, or whether to let mentors select their own, or mentees select their own mentors. And I think sometimes people like L&D departments or teams will feel that they need to match themselves, or they need to do the matching, or program sponsors will have an expectation that the matching is going to be done, rather than allowing mentees to select their own mentors. We've done both, and I think matching is really time intensive and not always necessary. So that's another thing that I would say is, once the program has been sold to leadership and they've signed off on it, and you've built all of the sort of preparation materials, I think maintaining the program is not a lot of time. It's pretty low lift for significant impact. But I think it's in prepping for that we spent more focused time. I'll think about exactly how many hours, but whatever the math is of like a quarter of one's time. Yeah, so 10 hours a week, something like that. Probably not that much, maybe more like 6 or 8 hours a week. But yeah, I mean, we also wanted to get it right. So we spent a lot of time making sure that that we sort of knew why we were doing this, that we could communicate why we were doing this to anyone involved, to mentors, to mentees, to leaders wondering why they should become a mentor, to leaders who had a manager, like a direct report of theirs, volunteering to be a mentor. We wanted to make sure that, mentorship was recognized across the company as something that's worth being recognized for. So there was just a lot of thinking. Happy to talk more about it as well offline. And I can do a little more digging into how much time we actually spent on this, but that's my answer in the moment. Okay, so back to this. I mentioned a little bit earlier, I don't need to go into a ton of detail on this, but I think training mentors and mentees was really helpful for the program. It allowed everybody to be on the same page. And it sort of allowed us to have a little bit of quality control when it came to the mentors. We were making sure that they understood what mentorship was, what was expected of them. We gave them, tips on how to be a good mentor, et cetera. And we also did the same with mentees and made it clear what their roles and responsibilities are for a mentor versus a mentee. We think that for most of these programs, we've put the onus on the mentee to schedule time to come to sessions with things in mind. And that, we sort of had to communicate ahead of time because some people don't know, and some people wouldn't necessarily know that they have to be proactive about it, or that they have to give thought to what they want to come and talk about ahead of time. And I think some people, in some of our earlier pilots, or our first pilot, when our training was still in its nascent stages, I think we had a few people who sort of showed up to mentorship just saying what can you teach me? Which isn't a great way to actually take advantage of mentorship. Roughly how much time are the 8, and are those in addition to or replacement? They're supplementary to the live sessions. So we required everyone to go through a live session. You don't have to do that. So I think it varies depending on your culture. I would say Squarespace is a very meeting heavy culture. And so it sort of potentially counterintuitively, we sometimes have to schedule things as live sessions in order for people to focus on them. And even though people feel like they're in meetings all the time and would probably benefit from doing more self-paced learning, I think sometimes they don't make time for it. So if we really want to ensure that people have gone through the material, we try to schedule a session. So we've made them 60-minute sessions. Actually, they may be 45-minute sessions now. We've tried to slim them down as much as possible. But I would say they're within 45 to 60 minutes. And the self-paced learning path has much more content in it. We have LinkedIn learning classes in it. We have articles in it. So I think there's a lot more, but it's not required. So it's a supplement. I think one of the other ways that we've been able to make this program successful is through intentional and frequent communication, both to mentors and mentees. So over our various programs, we've seen steadily increased utilization and satisfaction by introducing more nudges to mentors and mentees. And this is just some of them. These aren't all of the nudges that we send, but For mentees, sending nudges to encourage them to continue to schedule sessions. It sounds really obvious, but I think when people are busy and have a lot going on, they sort of sometimes forget. And so especially early on in a program, we would send these regular nudges. And after every single one, we would see a wave of signups. Highlighting specific mentors or spotlighting specific mentors was a really helpful way to drive, sort of traffic to those mentors. Suggesting topics or questions to bring. So some people like really knew this and they came to mentorship sessions super prepared, whereas others, I think, appreciated having more guidance on like, here's a question or here's a topic you might bring to a mentor. And so we have continued to build this out to make sure that we are providing enough guidelines and enough support that people don't feel lost in the process. And then we've also communicated more to mentors. So for example, we have mentorship as a component of one of our leadership development programs that also has classes and project work and things like that. So we started sending the mentors just these very small little digests of what their mentees were learning in the rest of the program, so that they were aware, if they're taking a session on influencing or productivity or whatever it might be, we wanted to make sure that the mentors knew they might be bringing topics around influencing to you. They might use this vocabulary for this new tool that they've learned. Here's what that tool is so that you can be aware of it as well. And this really helped mentors feel like they could be fully prepared. And then we also created a Slack channel for the mentors, and it's been pretty dynamic and like pretty active. Initially, this was just for us to share information with them, but it really grew into them sharing information with each other, and they've built their own community among themselves. So I think that's been another benefit of the program, is that the mentors themselves have bonded and have created cross-functional relationships and broadened their networks in that way. In terms of measuring effectiveness, we look at how many engagements are going on. One thing to note is that we start all of our programs through our system, through Plus Plus. But sometimes people initially book their sessions through Plus Plus, and then once they know each other really well, they just started using Google Calendar. So we sort of track the engagements as best we can, but we know that many are happening outside the system. Mentors or mentees can rate their mentors, so we look at that. We created supplemental surveys for all of our programs, both for mentors and mentees, that gave us a lot of information. And then we look at these lagging indicators. So we look at engagement survey data, again, both for mentors and mentees, because the program is not just for mentees, it's for both of them. So we look at the engagement survey data around growth, development, belonging. We look at mobility data, and we look at retention data. And so far for our programs, all of this is looking good, but this is something that we sort of look at on a long-term continual basis. But this is how we measure the effectiveness of the programs. I mentioned earlier, or like thinking through whether to match people on your own. How do you try to help sustain mentor-mentee engagement and recurring meetings? Can you expand on that question? Feel free to unmute if you want. I just want to make sure I'm answering it properly.
Sure, no problem. How do you help influence that relationship keeps on going over time and that it's helpful?
Yeah. I think, well, for one thing, we've run these in discrete like programs that have, or at least in sort of set time periods. So, okay, like everybody knows that they're signing on for this relationship for a certain amount of time, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, whatever it is. And I think that helps people feel like, okay, I'm at least committing to doing it for this period of time. I think to make sure that the sessions are feeling valuable, it comes back to some of the comms. So continuing to communicate both with mentors and mentees to suggest topics that they can bring to, if it's in a program, we're sort of polling them informally throughout the program in a Slack channel or whatever it might be, to say, like, have you met with your mentor? React with a thumbs up if you have. Like, do you have any tips to share with each other about a way that you've found more value from your relationship? I think in my experience so far, in our experience rolling out these programs, the risk, I think the relationship is, like the initial relationship is key, right? So In the programs where we have matched people, we put a fair amount of effort into really thinking through like whether that relation, and obviously it doesn't always work, but we've been very intentional and put a fair amount of thought into the matches to make sure that we think this is going to be a valuable relationship for both parties. If it's a question or if it's a program where the mentees are identifying their own mentors, we make it really clear that's like, if you're not clicking with this person, you don't have to continue to meet with them. Try someone new. You can have multiple mentors. And so I think that has also helped. But I would say the biggest risk to engagement is people just like feeling overwhelmed and forgetting. So it has been less, oh, I'm not finding value from this, and more like I haven't had time to schedule this. And so getting into the habit and trying to encourage them to be in a habit of recurring meetings, at least for a set period of time, I think has been a helpful way to really solidify that habit. And once you've met with someone every week for a month or however long it is, it sort of becomes second nature to you to continue to meet with that person. And I think that's been a way that we can like make that engagement can feel like it is or to keep up and maintain engagement throughout a program. And then, as I mentioned earlier, after the programs end, we don't require in any way that people continue to have a relationship. We certainly hope they will, but we don't require it. And we really put the ball is in the mentor's court for that. And we communicate that to them. We also communicate to the mentees sorry if this is a sort of rambling answer, but I think there are so many ways that we try to get at this. We also communicate to the mentees around the close of the relationship or the close of the formal program. So as it's wrapping up, we have more things that we share about like how to end a mentorship relationship, not because you're unhappy with it, but sort of how to keep up either how to like maintain the relationship and transition it into a slightly different, maybe less frequent meetings, but also how to keep those, how to retain the learnings that you gained from this relationship, even once the formal relationship has ended, so that when the programs close, we don't want mentees to feel sort of lost. We want them to still feel like they gain something and are able to continue to utilize the things that they learned in the relationship. It was a really long answer. I hope I vaguely answered your question, but I'm happy to talk more about it again, like offline at any point. I'll give you all my email address on my final slide, and you can email me and I'll talk about it anytime.
That was great. Thank you.
Okay, good. I think so quickly, in terms of addressing people's concerns about letting mentees select their own mentors, these are some things that we've heard. So maybe a fear that mentees will only look for the most senior person, regardless of relevance, and just schedule time with them. I think the two things that I would say to assuage this worry a little bit are, one, allow mentors to set their own availability, and our tool allows them to do that. So if I'm a mentor, like I think the fear is that senior mentors will be overutilized. But if I'm a mentor and I only want to meet with someone for 30 minutes once a month or whatever it might be, I can set that myself and I can set my availability. So I think there is less of a possibility for like overusing a mentor. And I think the focus on skill development really helped this as well, to make clear that a mentor doesn't just have to be a person who is really senior in the organization. They can be someone who is your peer. They can be someone who is leveled lower than you, but who has a skill that you don't have or that you want to, grow. So I think that helped. Another fear that I've heard a lot is that like mentees will be shy and they won't put themselves out there if the ball is in their court to reach out to a mentor. And I think being really clear about roles and responsibilities helps this. And also being clear that reaching out, being proactive is a growth experience in and of itself. It's part of the value of mentorship is actually being able to reach out to someone, be proactive, be thoughtful about what you want to get out of the relationship and what you want to get out of the engagement. So the last, I think, is sometimes people say, well, it's easier just to match people ourselves. I said this earlier, but my question is always like, is that the best use of your time? And my suspicion is often it's not. So I think letting mentees choose their own mentors can be really valuable. Okay, wrapping up, in terms of Squarespace, what's next for us is we're continuing to expand mentorship to new groups. We're not yet at a point, and I don't know sort of if/when we'll get there, where we just want to launch it broadly company-wide, but we want to keep launching it with different groups, different types of groups. We already have this, but the second thing, we're building a more robust self-service toolkit for leaders who want to launch their own mentorship programs, so that it doesn't always have to be sort of administratively managed by and led by our team. And then we're continuing to iterate on the guidelines around how often people should meet, how to, what they should talk about, how many meetings they should have, what the first meeting and the second meeting, et cetera, should look like. I think we're always looking to find a balance between providing enough guidelines that people feel supported and people feel like they have clarity, but not providing so many guidelines that we take away the need to be thoughtful and intentional about that themselves, because I think that is a skill that we want them to build through the mentorship process. So that's everything. I hope I didn't speak too fast, and I hope some of this was valuable or useful. This is my email address, hchase@squarespace.com. If you have any questions, I'm always happy to email, and I'll look at all those fireworky, confetti things. Thank you. I'm happy to talk about this anytime. I'm happy to meet and chat about it that way as well. So feel free to reach out to me. I know we have a few minutes left. I don't know if you have any other things to present, but if there are more questions, I'm happy to take them as well.
And if they're not, and you also be reached via the Slack channel, right, Hannah?
I don't think I'm in the Slack channel. I should be.
We'll change that. Timon is going to provide to join the Slack. So
okay. Then yes, as of the end of today, you can reach out to me in the Slack channel as well.
And so I just want to thank you. This was great. What I got out of this is that mentorship programs are super valuable. There is some effort involved to get it off the ground, and your lessons learned are almost like the playbook of how to short circuit a lot of that. So I'm looking forward to actually having this. We're going to convert this into an article as well and share with the community, so that it's all also in the written format. So hopefully it's a cheat sheet for how to stand up mentorship programs given your lessons learned for others. So yeah, that's the hope.
I hope so too, and I'm always available if you want to brainstorm ways to make it more specific and relevant to your specific needs. But yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. And there's a link to Slack channel. So if any other of you are not there, please join. We carry the conversation between meetings there. So, and thank you all. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.